Hi, everybody. This is Hondo Carpenter, your Las Vegas Raiders beat writer on Sports Illustrated and the host of the Las Vegas Raiders Insider podcast. It's great to be with you today. Joined now by my good friend. He's the editor and publisher of thespun.com. He covers the NFL from a bird's eye view. As you know, I cover it every day from a Raider perspective. He covers it from a bird's eye. It's just great to get that 1-2 punch each and every week covering this team and covering the NFL. Matt, let's quickly go to the Raiders. I mean, obviously, this is a Raider podcast. That's what we talk about. What a win. I predicted they would be 1-1 at this point, but completely wrong on both games. I thought they would have beat the Chargers. I thought they would lose to Baltimore. I'm going to tell you where I think I went wrong. I'd love your insight. I said that the Raiders were playing with an absolute chip on their shoulder because they let one go in Los Angeles, and they did. I thought the Baltimore Ravens, after letting one go, were going to play with a chip. They didn't. They played like a bunch of entitled people that thought the Raiders were just going to lay down. The Raiders just kept punching them in the face, even though it wasn't pretty, even though it was ugly. Al Davis's motto is just win, baby, not just win pretty. And they just out toughed them. They just literally, and then you could see the Ravens frustrated because the Raiders would not go away, the dumb penalties, the mistakes. Patrick Graham drew up the game plan for beating Baltimore, forcing Lamar Jackson to beat. It was the most impressive win outside of Christmas last year in Kansas City that I've seen from this Raider team. I would love your perspective on that win.
Yeah, I mean, I like you coming into the game. I thought they'd be 1-1 after 2 weeks. I mean, coming to the season, I thought they'd be 1-1. I thought they would have won the opener and lost week 2. I know that we had said but before the game last week, we both thought they would lose, so we thought they'd be 0-2 coming out of week 2. And on paper, that was a game that you don't expect them to win. They're going across the country. It's a 1:00 kickoff against a team that's supposed to be a contender in the AFC. It may still prove to be a contender in the AFC, but had lost their opener. They'd be kind of stewing a little bit and ready to come out and put down their foot on the Raiders. But like you said, the Raiders hung around. There was a point where the Ravens were in control and looked like they could seize the game, but the Raiders kept fighting back. They stayed with it. And I think that to be able to pull out a win like that in week 2 under a new head coach and a new regime, that's an incredible statement. I think you have to build off it, but I think to get that W is just tremendous for the Raiders and what they want to accomplish this year and beyond.
Yeah, I got to tell you, Matt, being there in person and just watching the fight and the resolve. How many more big wins like this do the Raiders need before? I mean, in the NFL, Patrick Graham is highly respected. But I'm shocked that outside of Raider fans, more people aren't talking about this guy. Almost got the Seattle job. Should have actually got it. Good for the Raiders that he didn't. But Patrick Graham, talk about his emergence on the national NFL scene.
Well, I think, like you said, he's always had a lot of respect internally within the league, going back to even when he was with the Giants a few years ago. I remember he had a couple of head coaching interviews, so it's not like he's a name that hasn't been brought up. But I do think he flies a little bit under the radar from a league-wide fan perspective, because people, again, he's been the D coordinator for the Giants. They weren't good. The Raiders, they haven't made the playoffs with him as their DC. So it's not like he's been thrust into the national spotlight there. But if they keep having performances like that and the Raiders are fighting for a playoff spot and they're doing those type of things, I think you'll get a lot more people talking about him as the year goes on.
Yeah, I got to tell you, his game plan. Uh, I had and I'll tell you who it is off air, but I had an NFL GM send. Matter of fact, he didn't send a text. He called me when Shannon and I were in the car the next day, and he said to Shannon and I, he goes, "The Raiders just literally wrote the script on how to beat Lamar Jackson." I thought that was pretty in depth.
It is. It's
All
and
right.
listen, it's a great thing for them to have set forward, and a great thing to kind of have on your resume so far in the year.
Totally agree with you. All right. Switching gears again, I want to talk about Brock Bowers. This rookie is absolutely tearing him up. He's exactly what the Raiders had hoped he would be. I mean, leading tight end through, I know it's only 2 games. We're not ready to coordinate him or crown him, but still, phenomenal player. Finally get over. What are your thoughts on Brock Bowers?
I think one of the things with Brock Bowers, and I saw some people mention this on Twitter, and I agree with the notion, is I think the early returns are a good argument for just drafting talent and seeing how it shakes out and stacking talent. The Raiders, they could have said, listen, we have a tight end and we drafted early last year, or we really like still Michael Mayer. We have some vets at the position. We don't need a tight end. But they said, listen, this kid's too good to pass up. He's a weapon. He's the best tight end in the draft for a reason. He's viewed as one of the best overall players in the draft for a reason, and a safe pick. So they went with that, and they're reaping the benefits. I think he has done exactly what you'd have expected him to do this early in his career. He looks like a major, major weapon for that offense. And if you look around the league, the tight end position, there's a look. I'm not saying there's not good players. There are, but it's not necessarily like a few years ago when you had a prime Travis Kelce and a Rob Gronkowski and some of those other guys that were going. When the tight end, it was like almost like a tight end revolution or a wave of tight ends. Mm-hmm. So if the Raiders have a guy at that position who's looking like one of the best in the league and can give them an advantage there, it could be huge for them as they build moving forward.
I earlier in the year, on my podcast, put out a comment from another team executive that said once teams learn that they're going to have that they're going to have to give extra special attention to Brock Bowers, it's going to make Davante Adams better. We're starting to see that already. You saw in the game where they couldn't just key on Davante; they had to worry about the two of them. And look at he and Davante both had big games.
Without a doubt, I think the more weapons you have, obviously, the better. And I think that the Raiders came into the year with two established wide receivers. You had a bona fide true number one in Davante Adams and a really solid number two in Jakobi Meyers. So you knew about that, but having that third option at tight end, and not just a guy that you could trust there, but a guy who's a legitimate weapon and can exploit defenses, and defenses have to worry about on almost every play, makes a huge difference because it does open those things up, and it makes for some easy completions for your quarterback.
All right, let's talk about this Raider team, because now it's really about keeping your foot on the gas. Andy Dalton's had success against the Raiders, but let's not pretend he's more than what he is. There's a reason he hasn't played in a couple of years. And we know, but he's not prime Andy Dalton, or he'd still be starting somewhere. The point of the matter is the Raiders are playing the Raiders on Sunday at Allegiant Stadium. They need to just go in, foot on the gas, and steamroll this team. Agree or disagree?
I would agree. I think that, through 2 weeks, obviously things could shake out differently by the end of the year, but you look at around the NFL through 2 weeks, I think the Panthers are definitely the worst roster, the worst team in the NFL. Listen, any given Sunday, anything can happen. And I do think Andy Dalton starting over Bryce Young helps them. I think it makes the Raiders' job tougher because you have a guy who's been through the battles and knows and understands, what it takes to compete at the NFL level. So he makes them a more competitive team, at least I believe on paper. However, the Raiders are better. They're coming home. It's the home opener. So Allegiant's going to be fired up. It's a game you got to win. I really think when you look at it, the Raiders got to get the next two, but one game at a time. It's this week against the Panthers before you even get to Cleveland. But you have to get this game because, like we've talked about, after the first 5 or 6 games, it gets tough for like a 6-game stretch. There's some really legitimate opponents in there. So I think you have to try to stack some wins where you can And there's no better place to stack a W than at home opener against a team that's probably the worst in the league.
Yep, 100% on that one. All right, let's talk about Davante Adams and that sideline catch. Have you seen a more beautiful catch than that one? I have not. Now,
Well,
I've seen some other more dramatic ones. I'm thinking about a one in a Super Bowl, one-handed. I'm
mhm.
not saying that it was the greatest catch of all time, but when you look at where it was on the field, the placement of his feet, it looked like Madden. Matter of fact, when I saw the first picture of it, I said to someone, I did this. I said, "Oh, look, somebody did a Madden reenactment of it." And then they're like, "No, that's the real picture." I mean, what a phenomenal talent Davante Adams is.
Sure. I mean, I think that this is something he's done throughout his career now. You're looking at, he's been in the NFL a decade and he's been one of the top receivers in the NFL for probably 7 or 8 years. And he's he's still at the top of his game. And I think that that's a great sign for the Raiders. It's a great sign for Gardner Minshew to know that you have that target with you. And I think that, again, listen, you've heard there were offseason rumors, and there's still rumors about, does Davante Adams want out? The Jets going to make a big push because they want to. They're almost all in this year, and they have Aaron Rodgers. The quickest way to kind of squelch those rumors or squelch that talk is to keep winning. And I think the more that they win and the more that they're in the mix in the AFC, you're going to hear people. They're not going to be able to talk about that stuff because he's going to be playing for a contending team. And week in, week out, you're getting his best effort.
Let's talk about Gardner Minshew. This is a guy leading in a couple of statistical categories. The Raiders' losses or poor play for 6.5 offensive quarters are not anywhere near all Gardner's issue. He's been good. I think people are not giving him the respect because 6 of the half of the 8 quarters the Raiders' offense was so bad. But how good do you think Gardner's been, and especially when you look at his stats?
Well, I think you talk about the offensive issues. The number one thing that I've been talked about is you got to get the running game to some semblance of kind of average play because you don't want to be so one-dimensional and you have to be able to move the ball on the ground. But I do think that Gardner Minshew, I think he's been the what you've expected. He's completed a ton of passes. He's gotten the ball out. He's not going to be wowing you, throwing strikes and big plays all over the field, but he's going to be a guy that keeps you kind of on schedule and can make plays for you when you need to. Obviously, again, listen, when they play the Chiefs, when they play some of these other top tier opponents down the road, I was going to say the Dolphins but I don't know if Tua is back or whatever. But teams that can score a lot of points,
right,
they're going to need to be a little bit more explosive, sure. But for a game like Sunday, where all they need is to kind of control the flow of the game and take care of the ball, I think he's perfect for that.
Yeah, very interesting. All right, I want to talk about Max Crosby,
Mm-hmm.
just playing at a level unseen even for him, which is amazing. I've said all along, he's a top 5 player in the entire league. The only player in the league that I would even entertain as a better defensive player, and I think it's a very fair conversation, is TJ Watt, who I think is elite. I think the two of them are 1A and 1B, and you can argue over which, and both parties would be right. When you look at him, and he hasn't even hit his prime yet, Matt. How good is he playing, and how good can he be?
Yeah, and I think that, after week 1, he had, you look at the stats from week 1, he had 5 tackles, 1 sack, but it still felt like I was watching, different clips, people talking on Twitter, that he didn't even look as dominant or as, ferocious as he looks, just like a man plays with his hair on fire in week 1. I think some of that was Joe Alt played really, really well, the rookie right tackle for the Chargers. But Max Crosby comes out last week, 2 sacks. He's all over the field. He's making those type of impact plays. And I think just the intensity he plays with and the fact that he can impact the game, not just by getting sacks, but by just being a disruptive force. There's only a handful of guys in the NFL, like you said, that can do that consistently. Him, your TJ Watts, your Myles Garrett's, Micah Parsons. There's a few. There's only a handful of guys that can really wreck a game on every down, and you have to be aware of them. And Max Crosby's one of them. And like you said, I think he's been in the league for. Is this? I'm trying to think offhand. Is this what is this? His 6th year, 5th years, something like that? I mean, he's not 6 years. This is a guy that is going to be around for a while longer. So he's not up in age. You're getting him in his prime. So it's definitely a treat for Raider fans.
Let's talk about Antonio Pierce. What a job he and his staff did out coaching John Harbaugh. And they just did. They made the adjustments. They just kept scrapping. At what point, and I know it's going to come with playoffs and everything else, but I'm still hearing him disrespected. It amazes me. The Raiders don't mind at all. They're using it as complete motivation. But it's just, to me, fundamentally wrong. DeMeco Ryans got credit instantly in Houston. Dan Campbell did in Detroit, and both men deserved it, by the way. Why is it that you think AP isn't?
I'm wondering if maybe some of it has to do with, even though he did well in the role, being the interim guy last year. I know there's always the history in the NFL or in a lot of sports really of the interim guy taking over full time. There's people that are skeptical or wait and see kind of. I thought it was big for him to have this kind of response because after week 1, they lose. One of the main stories coming out of the game is the 4th down punt, down 6 in the 4th quarter. So I think for him to come out and his team to respond the way they did, going across the country and getting that W, is huge for him. I think that, the more he settles into his career, the more he settles into this season. If this is the type of Raiders team that you get consistently, that toughness they displayed last year, that ability to kind of grind out some games and play with the best in the league, which, we saw them with the Chiefs last year. I still think the Ravens, especially if they win this week in Dallas and get to 1-2, I think the Ravens are still going to be a factor in the AFC this year. So, for him, that's another team that he beat with, elite talent. So I think that the pace, it'll take him a little bit longer. But I think that the foundation is there. And like you said, I think he kind of thrives off it and the Raiders thrive off it. You're better off, being under the radar a bit.
Mike, when you look at Matt, when you look at this Raider team now, the thing that stands out to me is they play very physical. I mean, they are a physical football team. They play with violence and ill intent. They're coming off. Their defensive backs are looking to saw you in half every single time. Even games they lose, teams are going to walk away having felt like they played the Raiders physically. There is that, and you and I are old enough to remember it, me older than you. They're bringing back that old school Raider, aren't they?
They are, and I think that that's what Antonio Pierce wants. And I think that there are teams. It's very funny how you see, and as much as the NFL evolves, as much as teams go through shifting changes and franchises, there's always that identity that they have that the great teams in those franchises win with. You know what I mean? Like, you look at the Steelers all these years later, even though the Steelers have won Super Bowls with, a Hall of Fame quarterback and Ben Roethlisberger and some great receivers, Antonio Brown and Santonio Holmes and all those guys, they're still at their heart, their core, a defensive-minded team and a strong running game. You look at, I'm trying to think of some other prime examples. The Bears have, not the Bears have been a consistent great team, but when they play well, when they have good seasons, it's because they have their defense leading the way. When you look at when the Giants have had good seasons, it's because they've had a pass rush, they've had a defense that's led the way. Franchises always seem to maintain some of their identity. And I think that's the Raiders getting back to that. The Raiders always were, did they have, did they play with, a little bit of like offensively, sometimes the sexy deep bomb because Al Davis loved to throw down the field and things like that? Did they have big names on that side of the ball? They could be explosive, yes, but at their heart and soul, they were a physical, defensive-minded team. And I think that that's the identity that Antonio Pierce wants to get back to.
All right. Way overreacting here, but let's talk about two teams that are 0-2. Jacksonville Jaguars, Baltimore Ravens. Those two teams are neither has a layup this weekend.
No.
It's fascinating to me. Who's going to be the first coach in the NFL fired this year?
Well, I think if of those two, if things got out of hand.
No. I don't think John Harbaugh's job is anywhere in jeopardy. I'm not saying that.
I'm just saying could be if things got really out of hand in Jacksonville. Peterson's could be. I think when you look around,
Baalke.
Yes,
the GM.
If you look around the league at the teams that are 0-2, and again, there's more to play out because there could be a team that's 1-1 that falls off a cliff or things like that. But the teams that are 0-2, the ones that are I think you look at, they're in danger of the head coach getting canned and massive changes. Jacksonville is one of them. I think the Giants are one of them. I think that Baltimore, they're not going to, they still believe in Harbaugh. And
Harbaugh's going nowhere.
Yeah. The Rams, I think they get some things turned around even with the injuries, but McVay's going nowhere. The Panthers are a mess, but they just hired everybody, so it would have to be another one and done type thing. The Broncos, Sean Payton's not going anywhere because of that contract. I know I'm missing some 0-2 teams, but
So let's talk about a different, same thought but different perspective. Okay, there are some teams that took. Okay, Caleb Williams, one of the most respected NFL scouts, a Super Bowl winning quarterback, Drew Stanton, was on this show prior to the draft saying Bo Nix was not even on his draftable board. That NFL teams hire him for his draft analysis of quarterbacks, and he had Bo Nix undraftable. He said that Caleb Williams to him had a third round grade. Doesn't mean he wasn't talent, but far too many issues. Issues we're seeing. CJ Stroud goes up to try to talk to him and he blows him off like he's a big timer. Too many. This is a quarterback driven league. And I know because there's such a lack of them, teams are desperate. But you're looking at some teams that, bad starts, but then you're looking at teams who have bad starts, but their coaches are safe. John Harbaugh, Sean McVay, they're not going anywhere. Their jobs are nowhere near in trouble. But then you do look at some teams that made some questionable draft picks. And if they put their eggs in that basket, it's going to be fascinating to watch, is it not?
Definitely. I think that the rookie quarterback development in general over these, over the season is going to be very fun to watch because you look at with Chicago, everybody talked, and I think I even said in the show, I agree with that Caleb Williams was stepping into on paper a really nice situation for a number 1 overall pick. He had weapons, but they have a defense. One of the things that a lot of people were saying was that the line was going to be improved. And right now the line does not look improved. And that's the quickest way to get your young QB into bad habits. And listen, if the Bears had the number 1 pick because of a smart trade they made and good luck of it breaking where the Panthers were the worst team in the league last year and they got the number 1 pick. And then they got a guy who had been widely touted and had been a hyped prospect for a while. If they can't get a quarterback out of this, they may never have that franchise quarterback there. But, it will be interesting. You look at some of the other 0-2 teams. I think one 0-2 team with a good amount of pressure on them because it's been, a few years where they really haven't stepped up and every year they come into the season as a team that the experts talk about their talent and talk about their staff and talk about the Colts. I mean, every single year, the Colts, we talk about Chris Ballard and the job he's done, and Shane Steichen and what kind of play caller he is, and the talent that Anthony Richardson has. But eventually, you got to start delivering. You got to start getting some W's. I mean, they lost a tight one week one, to a really good Houston team. So, that's not a big thing there. But then last week, I know it's on the road, I know it's at Lambeau, but you're playing the Packers, who are starting Malik Willis and are being ultra careful about it, and they don't want to, they're not playing a full offensive game plan. You got to find a way to get that W. I think those two AFC South teams have a lot of pressure on them to kind of get things going. And I think of the coaches that are 0-2, I do think Doug Peterson, if things went really south there, you could see some people start to wonder about his future in Jacksonville. And I think Brian Daboll in New York probably has a lot of pressure on him, because if the ownership will want to clean house if they have a 3-14 or 4-13 season.
So you talked about somebody that I want to talk to you about, Malik Willis.
Mm-hmm.
I am like that kid. I don't know if he can be something. I think he can. But for the Packers to go out and pick him up for a 7th round pick, literally just months after he'd been a first rounder, was stunning to me. It's why the Packers continue to play at a high level every year. They're playing checkers, why so many other teams are playing chess. It tells me the futility of the Titans and the mastery of the Packers. I'd love your thoughts on it.
I thought what was impressive was that, they did have an extra day or two to prepare because of the Friday night game in week one. But Matt LaFleur being able to put together a game plan that Malik Willis felt comfortable with and executing it. Because Malik Willis, in addition to being he was a raw prospect coming into the league, but he's also a guy in his first 2 seasons at Tennessee didn't play a lot of football. He made a few starts, he played some, but he didn't, he wasn't like he was the starter for a full season and they gave up on him. So he hasn't played a lot of NFL football. So for them to kind of take what he felt comfortable doing and get a win out of it. This week we'll see. Jordan Love is leaving it open to him coming back and playing, ironically, against the Titans enough, but it would be kind of funny to see Malik Willis play against his former team. And I think the Packers, I know 1-1, you want to get to 2-1, but it might be worth it for the long term to be careful with Jordan Love's health, but we'll see what they do.
I got to tell you, the thing that impressed me was after the game when Malik Willis was like, hey, we're praying for Jordan. We hope he's back next week. He did nothing to put the spotlight on him. He kept it on Jordan Love. I mean, everything character-wise with Malik Willis is precious, and he's got a lot of talent. I think that guy is a QB1 in this league. I think. I don't know it. I'm not saying with certainty, but I have not seen enough to rule that kid out. Have you?
No, I think you have to see how much more development he gets or how many more opportunities he gets. But I do think that this was a good sign for him as he's trying to resurrect his career a little bit and get a second opportunity in the league.
Totally agree. He's the great Matt Hladik from thespun.com. Matt, would you tell everybody your social media, please?
Sure. You can find me on X, Twitter, at Matt Hladik 919, at MATTHLADIK 919. And, I'm always there down to interact and talk some ball. So come find me.